evil and to facilitate a unification of North and South Korea, which of course would put essentially the Republic of Korea, if it went that way, right on its border. So geopolitically, China is very sensitive about having that buffer state in North Korea.
Save the rest of my questions for classified setting. Mr. Ruppersberger.
Okay, thank you very much. First thing, I think we can all agree, I hope, that one of the most serious threats facing our country now, other than weapons of mass destruction, are cyber attacks. As we're speaking now, we're having thousands of cyber attacks. It's been said by the Cyber Command that they estimate in the last 2 years that we have lost over $400 billion in American money and American trade secrets, the loss of jobs, even to the extent that it's been stated that China has cyber attacked our fertilizer companies because they're in competition with our fertilizer companies. I think right now we have different types of attacks, economic attacks, but I think it's been mentioned a little bit today, we're concerned about destructive attacks. And it's been reported that Iran had an attack on Aramco, which is Saudi Arabia, one of the largest oil companies in the world, and that he took out over 30,000 of their computers in one attack. And that even though they're not as sophisticated as other countries, that Iran could really have a successful attack in our banking system, in our grid systems, in our stock market, whatever. Now, with that said, I'm asking the question, first, General Clapper, when it comes to cyber, do you consider our economic security a critical part of national security?
Oh, absolutely.
That's good to hear. Okay. Now, Director Mueller, I know the last hearing we had here, an open hearing, I asked the question, what do you feel are the most severe threats to our country at this time and in the future? And I think that your comment, if I can recall correctly, was that you felt that weapons of mass destruction and that cyber attacks were some of the most serious issues facing our country's national security, our domestic national security. Do you still feel that way today?
I do. I would say counterterrorism remains, given what's remains our #1 priority, given what's happening in the countries that are going through the Arab Spring, North Africa, and the like, as well as still Yemen, Somalia, and other countries in transition. But right now, cyber is swiftly coming beside counterterrorism, both principally from nation states, but also from terrorist groups.
Well, let me say this. Getting back to the cyber issue again. Isn't there a good possibility that terrorists can hire people or try to cyber attack us as one of the weapons against the United States for terrorism?
Yes.
And could you give an example?
Well, we have seen there has been information about efforts of terrorist groups to enlist the individuals, go out and recruit individuals, have the cyber skills with the hopes and expectation of being able to use those cyber skills for a terrorist attack. And I can be more specific in the closed session, but there are terrorist groups who have gone so far as to attempted to go into systems to the point where they can know that they can lie there for a period of time and at some point in time in the future launch a cyber attack at the point in time where they feel it will be most beneficial. Now, there has not been, we've seen indications, intelligence of this. I do not believe at this point in time we have any particular group that is in possession of that capability at this juncture.
It could be purchased, though, could it not?
Yes.
Now, there was testimony here today. We talked about the issue, the different threats that were out there. Talked about nation states such as China and Russia and individuals like that, or groups, countries like that. Are you familiar with the Mandiant report?
I am.
Could you analyze very quickly what you said, what the Mandiant report said?
That particular report accumulated information by Mandiant over a period of time to indicate out of a particular building in China, a group of individuals had undertaken systematic exfiltration of a variety of materials relating to the defense of the United States, among other things, over a substantial period of time. The unique aspect of the Mandiant report, I think, is the fact that it identified a particular place and individuals associated with that place. One of the things we tend to forget that behind every computer intrusion, there is a person sitting at a keyboard, and that it is the ultimate objective is to identify that person and stop that person's behavior. It is not just sufficient to protect our databases, because quite often whatever protections you have today will fall tomorrow. And so we also have to focus on identifying the persons behind the keyboards and making certain that we have a policy or capabilities to deter that person. What the Mandiant report did was publicize, I believe, the faces behind the attacks.
Well, it's my understanding that Mandiant had 141 clients that had been cyber attacked, and that they showed the connection between those individuals in China and those attacks. It's also my understanding that the report said that those individuals behind the that were attacking our different companies were connected to the Chinese military. Do you recall that being in the report?
Yes.
Okay, so there was a connection between the Chinese military and these attacks on 141 of Mandiant's clients. One of those clients, by the way, was the New York Times, and that's what the report said. And I think Mandiant, we can thank Mandiant for letting the public know how serious this is, because a lot of what we know is still classified. But I think the fact that they put that out, we need to let the public know how serious the cyber attacks are. And unfortunately, we have a long way to go, I think, for the average person to realize how serious that is. I do want to say this while you're here, and I'm going to ask another question, but I don't want to slip by. I think you're retiring in September, and I want to just say that you are one of the most professional individuals working in this community. You've done a great job. You have a high degree of integrity. And I've said this before. When I first came on the committee, I was a little concerned about where the FBI was as far as intelligence and the focus. And I think, without a doubt, the FBI is probably the most improved in the area of cyber and all the issues you do in the intelligence arena. I think you need to get credit as the leader, but you have a great team. You're only as good as your team. And so if you can take it back, we really appreciate working with the rest of the intelligence community, because it's a teamwork effort, and you've come a long way, I think.
Well, thank you. But you focus on really the praise goes to the agents, the analysts, and the personnel who do a really remarkable job. Okay.
And you're retiring, what, in September? Is that the date?
I don't use the word retirement. My term ends in September.
Okay. All right. Also, I want to ask the question. What can be done to aid us in bringing to justice, say, because of the Mandiant report, where we have evidence, Chinese cyber actors in China, and who we know are conducting this economic espionage?
There are a number of things that can be done, some in the classified realm, some otherwise. Recently, the State Department called out China for its activities, demarched China for its activities. I think just about anyone in the administration who travels to China, one of the things on your amongst the talking points is to highlight the fact that our relationship is tremendously undercut by their continuously supporting these types of attacks. There are things that can be done in the criminal arena in terms of charges, but the fact is everybody realizes these persons are in another country with whom it's very difficult to get a person to be returned. I think we can go into some of those activities that we've undertaken to date in closed session. I do want people to know that both in the exterior and the outward facing towards China, there are a number of things that have been accomplished, but also in the more classified realm, we've undertaken actions and activities.
Okay. Another thing I want to ask, we seem to be more aggressive. We need to be, in my opinion, I think Mr. Rogers feels the same way, more aggressive and dealing with these cyber threats. It's just very serious, and we have to be a lot more aggressive. As we just passed a bill out of our committee yesterday, our information sharing bill that we hope we'll be able to pass on the floor to take it to the Senate, and then the Senate hopefully will be able to pass an information sharing bill and then go to the President. It's very important that the Senate, the House, and the President and administration, we work together to deal with this serious cyber threat. But at this point, I think a lot of us feel that we're being attacked on a regular basis, and we're not in a position now to protect our country, our businesses, and our individuals from these cyber threats. And again, I'm very concerned about a destructive threat in our country. I understand that you and Secretary Napolitano and General Alexander went to a briefing yesterday that Steny Hoyer put together on national security. And in that briefing, it was stated, I'm not sure if it was you or if it was Secretary Napolitano, that said basically that the most important thing we can do to protect our country now is to have legislation that would allow information sharing between the government and between the private sector. And the reason for that is that what people might not understand is that 80% of our network is controlled by the private sector. So in order to protect our country, there's got to be this partnership, and we have to make sure that we have information sharing and also protect the privacy rights of our individuals. And we've gone a long way to make sure we protect those privacy rights. Do you believe that information sharing is the first step and the most important step right now to protect our country and our citizens from this threat?
I'd say it's a key goal, absolutely, if we wish to be successful in addressing these threats.
I'd like to give examples. It feels here right now, those of us who deal in this arena, trying to do what's right for America and protect our privacy rights. If you were a meteorologist and you had this Hurricane Sandy was coming up the East Coast, and yet you were not able to warn your citizens that was doing. That's the frustration I think a lot of us have right now, why it's so important, to pass our bill. And I think that hopefully we can come together, the Senate, the House, and the administration, to make sure we deal with this threat in the proper way and move forward. So I thank you all for being involved in this bill, and I think if we can roll up our sleeves and do what's right, we'll go forward with respect to that. I know the only other thing I do want to bring up now, General Clapper, is the issue of space. Most of our country, like cyber, are not aware of how important space is to our national security, to what we do every day, economic, how space affects people's lives every day. GPS systems, almost anything involving technology or computers somehow will be involved with space. And yet most people don't understand that. I mean, in the old days when we went to the moon, people knew who all the astronauts were. I think most people might know who the NFL quarterbacks are, especially my quarterback with the Super Bowl champion Ravens, Joe Flacco. But basically, we have to keep educating. And space is expensive, but one of the reasons we're the most powerful country in the world is because of space. Now, I was with a group of leaders in space just last week, and we talked about the issue of cost and performance and those issues. And one of the major issues that came up was the issue of commercial applications to space, where we're not going to go to the moon from a commercial point of view, but space stations like SpaceX and other groups that have done that, who are starting to create competition. And General Clapper, do you have a position on where we need to be from a commercial point of view with respect to the space industry?
Well, you mentioned SpaceX as an example, and of course we've discussed many times the need for more players in the launch business. And so I've visited SpaceX. I'm very impressed with what they're doing, and I think that there is an agreement now between NRO and the Air Force on a certification process. And I think so. I'm all for that, and the same is true of the commercial imagery industry. But I'm also very mindful of the budget extremis that we're going through, and I've already spoken to the impacts of sequestration, and what our general funding profile is going to be. So we're going to have challenges on availing ourselves of these capabilities. One other dimension to space, which is quite important, which we perhaps could discuss in closed session, is space protection. And that is another dimension of this that we also have to attend to.
Okay, well, you know, I agree with those comments. If you look at why this is one of the reasons we're a great country is because we've educated some very smart people in that arena, and that's also very important. But I think if you look at innovation and competition, it helps the competition. It helps the government make sure that they're not competing with the commercial side, and that it will bring costs down. And I hope that will occur. Well, thank you all for being here today. And I guess we're going into closed session right now. Oh, Mr. Langeman, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Langeman, to finish out the round out the discussion today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're winding down the closed session right now, so I'll hold my questions for the closed session. But I did want to thank our witnesses for testifying here today, and in particular, Director Brennan. This is your first opportunity to testify before us, and I just wanted to welcome you and congratulate you on your new role as director. Look forward to working with you. But to all of you, thank you for your service. I know that you paid particular attention. It was focused on cybersecurity here in this open session today. Thank you for the work you're doing in cyber, and I'll have some questions in that field in closed session. Thank you all.
I do want to say that, you know, I acknowledge Director Mueller's service, and thank you for that. But I do also want to acknowledge Congressman Langevin. He's not going to. We're going to closed session, but he is one of the individuals on the Hill that's had a lot of expertise and one of the key people who's been working on this cyber issue from the very beginning. So I want to thank you for your service too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will reconvene at 12:25 in the HPSI classified spaces for filling out and rounding out the classified discussion on issues of importance to the intelligence community and the national security of the United States. Meeting is adjourned until 12:25.